Mech Warrior, know your weapon. In this Battletech vlog, we're going to explore the various inner sphere weapon platforms, understanding the pros and cons, the tactica, building that checklist, focusing on range as the entry point. Battletech as this idea of modifiers, the constant interplay of modifiers. You start with a base number and then layer over that. We are simplifying things a little bit, but the game of Armored Combat explains this in greater detail, but we need to framework this for understanding the role that weapons play, especially since they are the primary way of transmitting damage to your opponent. Secondary or other options, of course, would be physical attacks or heat attacks. But this idea of starting with a base modifier, and then depending on your movement, are you walking? Are you running? Did you jump? Combined with the range of the weapon profile. That's going to give you a base number. That's going to be the base number for the damage. And then locked into that, adjusted for that, is the target that you're shooting at. How far did it move? Is there cover? Is part of it obscured? And then we'll roll to hit and follow it out from there. So understanding how to match weapons to range, to damage profile, to heat, when to push it, when to play conservative, is an important aspect of Battletech, especially when we're looking to evaluate certain mechs based on the weight class, based on the role, and based on the battle value. So we start off with lasers. They're kind of this standard weapon in Battletech. They represent, of course, advanced but stable technology. They've got good range. They've got good heat generation. Good heat generation means you fire it and there's not a ton of heat, or the heat is appropriate for the damage. And they don't utilize any ammo. They run directly off the mech. So we have large, medium, and small lasers. Effectively, inner sphere, clan tech changes things. Lost tech changes things. We're going to get to that in the follow-up vlogs, but this is kind of the core establishment. Medium lasers are some of the best weapons in the game. Based on range, damage, 5 heat, they're pretty standard. They can vaporize 5 points of armor. You can fire them again and again. Heat dissipation can be handled by most mechs, and essentially you have unlimited shots. So you can take the shot not having to worry about ammo. And we're going to talk about ammunition, how for new players, lasers are understandable. Fancy missiles, maybe, but good old-fashioned autocannons, why? So we've got our group of lasers, large, medium, small. Then we move to autocannons. Now, autocannons are interesting because the Battletech lore, given the diversity of weapons that are produced, even within a single mech, often the weapons that are produced for it, there could be 3 or 4 manufacturers. It could have been retrofitted. It could have been refitted. It could have the original weapon. So Battletech takes a little bit of liberty here with an autocannon. You've got 2, 5, 10, and 20. The number is the amount of damage that it produces should it hit. And Battletech kind of explains it like an autocannon 10 does 10 points of damage, vaporizes 10 armor points. It could be a single kind of reactive slug firing out autocannon. It could be multiple shots. It could be chain shots. It leaves it kind of up to say how it fires, how it feeds, what it does. But certainly it's automated and how it's utilized. It's explained in the Battletech lore that these are pretty sophisticated systems, both in how they feed, both in how they track, both in the ammunition that's used. They're reliable. They're able to stand up to a lot of punishment in the narrative, and they're simple to service. I mean, think about a laser. If it's mounted in your mech's arm and you punch something or the arm takes damage, those optics get misaligned. That's maintenance time. Now, that doesn't happen in the actual tabletop, but in the lore, when a mech goes into service or if a mech's out in the field for an extended period of time, autocannons are extremely reliable and they're very cheap. So in terms of production, the inner sphere, and reliability, that's why we see them mounted on so many mechs. But it's not some World War II type design. They are very, very advanced. Now we start with the autocannon 2. This has a tremendous amount of range, some of the longest range in the game. but then it only does 2 points of damage. So tactically here, what we see is the ability to fire out on targets, push light mechs away, engage vehicles, engage air units, maybe put a little bit of damage on a light or a medium. You're trading extreme damage for extreme range. Then we move into autocannon 5s and 10s. This is the workhorse, similar to the medium laser, 5 points of damage. Similar to the PPC, 10 points of damage. You see these on a lot of mechs as a primary weapon. The primary weapon on a mech is defined as usually located in the arm and a significant source of damage that you're going to be able to fire every single turn. And then secondary weapons are usually ones that deal a little bit of less damage, right? If we look at the Locust, it's got a medium laser as the primary weapon. It's got machine guns or missiles, depending on the variant, as the secondary. We look at some medium mechs. We've got the Wolverine. We've got the autocannon as the primary. You've got the missiles and lasers as the secondary. So you see on a lot of mechs, autocannon 5s, autocannon 10s based on the tonnage. Now we get to 20. You see the autocannon 20, and it's tempting. You see that autocannon 20 on a Hunchback, or certainly on the Cyclops or Atlas, heavy class assault mechs. And the first thing you notice is 20 points of damage. The second thing that's also noticed, although it's noticed the first time you're noticing it for the first time, your opponent is noticing 20 points of damage. The range is extremely, extremely short. The ammo is expensive compared to other shots. You don't have a lot, but if you're able to connect, massive, game-changing amounts of damage. The potential to just literally knock the mech down with that shot. Now, the tactica of autocannons, there are vulnerabilities. The first, of course, is primary ammunition. You are limited to the number of shots that you can fire. Now, some mechs carry more ammo than others. The question here, of course, is, are you playing in a campaign, meaning multiple scenarios, or are you playing scenarios that are multiply linked, where the ammo you have is for the next 3 games? Are you just playing a one-off game? Is there a resupply cost? You could potentially run out of ammo if it's a big enough game, a large enough game, or a long enough game. So you need to kind of manage that, or at least be aware of it. Are you going to run out? With energy-based weapons, and we're going to get to the PPC in a moment, particle cannons, you don't have to worry about it. You just fire it. The real liability of autocannons is the fact that in core inner sphere tech, without reinforced case and ammo, you get hit there. You get critted there, it explodes. It's going to core out your mech. It's just what it is. If you push your heat, there's the potential for your ammo to cook off if you have ammo-based systems. That can potentially explode. So you really need to watch out for that. Now, on a sidebar, and I say sidebar because this is optional. In the Game of Armored Combat core, it's not there, but in TAC Ops and supplements, it is. Autocannons can be fitted with different types of ammunition. So if you're playing with those rules, it kind of offsets this fact that, yes, look, you've got ammo, but with the ability to switch or load different ammunition, it makes it a lot more adaptable than a straight-up laser. But again, of course, the laser has the consistency of damage, range, and no ammunition, which in Battletech, mechs that are primarily energy weapons, they're called zombie mechs, in that you have to put them down. You have to destroy them, right? They've got energy weapons all out. You blow off their arms. They're still functioning. They're going to be firing constantly, not only not running out of ammo, but also just shooting and shooting and shooting. They can push the heat. They can take the modifiers. An all-energy mech takes a lot more to put down than an autocannon-based mech. So now we start to jump into missile systems. We're going to put the PPC off to the side for a moment because it is energy-based, but there's a little bit of narrative to it, and it represents kind of an interesting twist in Battletech technology. Missiles follow a similar classification as the autocannons. You've got short-range missiles, SRM, and you've got long-range missiles, LRM. And again, depending on the tech, these could be guided missiles, the missiles itself. They could be kind of dumb missiles guided by optics. It could be the battle mech locking onto a target. There's a lot of different systems, a lot of different ways that it's represented in the narrative. We're going to put rockets aside for a moment. We are going to mention it. It's kind of a sub-weapon. It's out there in the tech ops. I wouldn't say it's the core, but it's got some interesting things worth mentioning. Rockets versus missiles, how it's defined. The primary thing with missiles is, as you shoot them, obviously range. LRM, long-range missiles, are going to have some of the biggest reach in the game. The interesting tactica here is long-range missiles can fire indirect. Now, in Battletech, you need line of sight. Might be really long. It's going to have the numbers to hit. We've talked about those modifiers up and down in your movement, the target's movement. Indirect fire means essentially you're firing up and over, almost like artillery, and trying to hit the target. So you need a spotter to do that. But the advantage is you don't need line of sight from the shooters. Spotters could be a light mech, could be some air support, could be some embedded infantry that got dropped off by a Karnov. That's a transport, flying transport. You see mechs like the Archer, the Longbow, mechs that have multiple LRM 20 packs. Firing indirect suddenly becomes very, very terrifying. So that is something, a special sub-rule of the long-range missiles. Now, missiles, long-range and short-range, they spread, they scatter, depending on where they hit. So we have to determine that. Naturally, the higher the number, 20-pack, 15-pack, 10-pack, 5-pack, or 6, 4, 2 for the short-range missiles, it's going to deal the damage. Short-range missiles do a little bit more damage because in the narrative, the warhead is bigger because there's less fuel consumption in terms of size, where the long-range missiles are longer in terms of fuel consumption. At least that's how it was explained in the early kind of tech manual game of armored combat. Missiles are interesting because they follow a similar tech as the autocannons. They are very sophisticated, but you're vulnerable to taking an ammo hit, right? There's some sort of ammo bin feeding in the missiles. That takes a hit. You're also limited to range. You're also limited to the amounts of missiles that you can physically carry, possibly resupply or running dry. That could be a potential problem for a mech like the Longbow, where its primary weapons are those missiles, 220 packs, 5 packs. You run out, you've got a medium laser for backup, but on an assault class mech, that's nothing. Where the Archer, yes, if you run dry, you still got the medium lasers. So you need to kind of balance that out if you're looking at missiles. The advantage of missiles, and of course pushing the heat, that needs to be mentioned. If you push the heat, ammo cooks off, you've got missiles, whereas an all energy-based mech, again, does not have to worry about that. So when we're exploring missiles, there is also a sub-rule with the short-range missiles. You can swap out smoke, infernos. There's about 5 or 6 different missile classifications where you're swapping out the warhead, adding a lot more versatility. So like the autocannon, suddenly those liabilities are at least balanced off by a variety of ammunition. Now, again, this is not included in the game of armored combat. The core, it's additional supplemental rules. What you're going to see in Battletech is the core rules are what you build off of. And as a player, you get to decide with your opponent, what do you want to play with? Similar like, hey, this game, let's just play all mechs. Or maybe we want to include tanks, or maybe we want to include artillery. You get to mix and match with Battletech to scale the game up or down based on experience, based on physically how much time you have to play, and also how much you enjoy the game. Now, let's also mention rockets for a moment. You're looking at the Archer. And you notice there's a variant. What you'll see in Battletech with the various mechs, there's a primary configuration, how it rolled off the factory line. And often that's the mainly supported mech. Then there are variants, and variants might be, well, the mech had a problem with this unit, so over time we replaced it with that. Or its role changed slightly and we changed, 5 or 6 weapons. Or it could be something like, we just don't have the tech to support this thing. We can barely support the mech itself. We're going to have to downgrade some of it. And of course, you can customize your mech any way that you like and explore the various options from that perspective. Rockets are a downgrade that we first see in the Archer. You take out the fancy missile systems and you replace them with essentially literally dumb rockets, unguided, light them off rockets. But by downgrading that, not only do you bring down the battle value, you can fire off hundreds of rockets in a turn. It's like a Death Blossom type move, an Alpha Strike type move. You can get up there with that Archer, open the missile bays, literally pop off absolutely everything. Don't have to worry about heat, nothing to cook off. There's nothing left. Of course, you got to cool down, beat the shutdown, completely obliterate the target, then come back online and now activate your lasers and continue the fight. Where with long-range missiles, you're only allowed to cycle through the pack that you have. If I have a 20, I can only fire the 20. If I have two 20s, I can only fire the two 20s. The last weapon that's out there, and again, we're just summarizing these weapon systems. There's a little bit more complexity, of course, but as you explore the various tech manuals and build out your miniature collection, it'll help you to understand the configurations of certain mechs. Then we're going to look at anti-infantry, which could also be used against mechs. PPCs, particle cannons, 10 points of damage, 10 heat. That's offset by extreme range. The offset there, of course, the way they say to protect the mech, the electrical charge, you can't fire them at close range, at extremely close range. You can, but there's a modifier against it. So PPCs are kind of interesting because the 10 points of damage is significant. The range is significant. That gives it a tremendous edge. I mean, you see them as primary weapons often on heavier mechs like the Warhammer or the Marauder. You see them on assault mechs like the Battlemaster. In Inner Sphere Tech, they have consistent long-range 10 points punch, no ammo. But the offset isn't so much the point-blank range, because often mechs that will mount a PPC as a primary weapon have a brace of secondary weapons, short-range missiles, medium lasers, that you're going to switch to anyway, should you get to those minimums. But it's not ammo-based. So, again, a zombie mech like the Awesome, the assault mech, two PPCs, left torso, right torso, PPC in the arms get blown off, that thing's still going. You blow out a torso, it's still got the other PPC. It's got no ammo in there. You go to internals, you don't have to worry about an ammo explosion. You can push the heat. You can push the modifiers. You're not going to cook off. It's truly a terrifying mech armed with PPCs. PPCs put the hurt on lights and mediums consistently. So it's a very popular weapon system, and you're going to see it on a lot of mechs once you hit into the higher medium mech range up into heavies and assaults. I mean, the classic medium that has it is the Griffin. Now, machine guns and flamers. Infantry are an important part of Battletech, right? The mechs, the Knights of the Realm are the focus. But there are combined arms in Battletech. Mechs are expensive. We're going to have tanks. We're going to have infantry. We're going to have air support. So different mechs will pack weapons geared to fight light vehicles and infantry. We see this with the flamer. We see this with the machine gun. I'm going to simplify things here. Infantry have some base rules. They come in different sizes, and they're mounted on a base, and they represent occupying a hex. They're not standing there in like perfect formation. They're like thought to be spread out among the hex. In buildings and in certain areas, weapon damage is reduced significantly because they're dispersed. Without the proper weapons, infantry become a real pain, especially if they're dug in to the terrain. Machine guns and flamers will bypass that and deal direct damage multiplied. So a machine gun can quickly, on a mech, can quickly gun down infantry. Flamer can quickly take care of that. You'll see some mechs that have these as secondary weapons or as sub-weapons, especially on heavies and assaults, to deal with it. Now, that's not to say you can't use these against mechs. You hit them with a flamer, it's going to do some damage, it's going to raise some heat. You hit them with a machine gun, it's going to do some damage. But the range is literally point blank. You literally need to be so close. Now, that's not to say you're not going to fire them. but they're not your first choice to use against a mech, or honestly to use against anything outside of firing against light mechs. But also, if a light mech is that close to you and you're able to use your machine gun, unless you're a light mech itself, that's not a good place for a light mech to be. Light mechs want to be running and gunning far away, engaging out of different firing arcs. So we see the primary weapons in Battletech, again, looking at, as you look at the mechs, looking and understanding the range of the weapon and asking yourself, how can I bring that range down? Or if I'm going to push that range out to the maximum, how do I bring down those other modifiers? Then you look at damage itself, but you have to offset that by heat. You have to offset that by heat. And then layered into that are the questions of ammo explosions, location, different ammo, supplemental ammo, variant ammo, and playing with that if you want to jump into those optional rules in Battletech.